Not because anybody is keeping them secret. It's just that they're locked away from surface dabbling. You just can't get to it with a superficial practice. That's why it's a secret. So you get to lean in to prayer and stop thinking of it as a formula to appease God, but think of it more as this shift and deepening in consciousness, and approach it with a mindfulness, a soberness, and a seriousness that really takes you into a deep understanding. And there you start to see the peeling back in layers of life. You start to get all kinds of different awarenesses. And it doesn't come from a superficial application, just how it is. So I mention that also because today what I talk about might be old news for you, or it might be brand new information for you, or it might be a refresher. I don't know where you are on your journey, but I'm going to introduce an idea that I first talked about in 2004. And it's this idea that, well, prayer, it doesn't have to be trapped in that definition of that 3 to 5 minute thing you do once or twice a day with 5 steps neatly in its place. Actually, it's a whole attitude towards life. In fact, we could take our structure of prayer, which we'll review in a moment, and spread it out across an entire day. And let it be the motion that we move through life with. I hope my PowerPoint is working. Yeah, there it is. Right from the beginning moments when we start to wake day, right to where we start to tie up the day and do the completion. Right there. That is the format of prayer that if you've studied already, you'll start to recognize. We're going to look at it like that today and spread it out across the day. And so what we're looking at is, what if the 5 phases of your day become the prayer of your life and converts all of the living in your day into the elements of mindful prayer? How would that feel? You know, when I've done this, I do it from time to time. I don't do it every single day because I find it so intense. You know, it's so intense and it requires such a lot of mindfulness that I can't always keep with the program. You know, and what it does for me is that it takes the ordinary activities of my life and shows them in a light that I couldn't experience before when I was asleep. Because a day of mindfulness brings things into sharper focus. And then the ordinary things of my life become the very parts of my prayer. And every action then reveals an idea of divinity that was always there, but before I couldn't see. So there are a few things to keep in mind as we review this idea. And the first is everything we've talked about up until this moment. Because we've been spending some time laying this foundation for a soberness and a seriousness. Stop the silliness around prayer. Forget this idea of the universe as a cosmic vending machine. Just, deepen. Love life and pray from the center of connectedness. So keeping that in mind, we're going to look even deeper in. And the second thing I want to mention is really important to keep in mind for this practice of a day of mindful prayer is the willingness to stay present for the practice in the moment. Because that's the backbone of prayer, if it's 5 minutes or if it's a whole day long. And what I mean by that is the ability to gently look at what is before you in the day, from the waking moments to the completion, and to agree to be as undistracted as possible. And what I mean by that is, if you're sitting, sit. And if you're walking, walk. And if you're listening, listen. And then add to that, if you're sitting, know that you're sitting. And if you're walking, know that you're walking. And if you're listening, you know that you're listening. See, now that's what I'm talking about when I say sober, mindful, mature. It's a presence of mind in prayer that really makes the difference versus a formula that you just repeat. One great teacher in prayer, Helene Schiarovino, I think that's how you pronounce her name, she wrote these words: when you concentrate on the time at hand and its potential for greater good, that's when you're living a prayer. You become aware in these moments of the divine aspects in every instance, and that turns you into a healthier, kinder person, and it enhances your awareness of the moment and leads you to a more sacred understanding of just about everything. In my experience, that's true. So let's review the 5 steps of treatment and see how we might apply them to a day. First of all, for those, I know there are many students I see who have been through the foundations class, so I know you can just yell out the 5 steps of spiritual mind treatment right now. Number 1, marvelous. Number 2, and the next? It's a little lackluster, but I'm appreciating some of it. That's more like it. Goodness gracious. All the excitement around prayer. Thanksgiving. Really. Actually, when I put this together, I looked at some of those words. And, Thanksgiving, I'm shifting the word I use. Talk about being attached to the exact right labels. I almost felt guilty for changing the word I use for the 4th step, because, I come from a tradition where thanking God was continuous and important, and it's a fine line for me. I can slip right back to this idea of God somewhere up, and I've got to thank Him. So it's a shift. So I'm actually adapting the word that I use for that step. I'm calling it celebration, because that's really what's happening in that step is you're having a party inside because of the delightful experience that you've had throughout the whole process. You know what I'm talking about? So let's start at the beginning with those first awakening moments when you wake up. Maybe you even put a note beside the bed for you. Have your journal ready so that when you do wake up, those first awakening moments is the beginning of your day of prayer, recognition. And that word, recognition, I think helps me understand what is the content of that part of the prayer supposed to be like. The word itself is delightful. Recognize. Again. To know again what you already knew. There you have it. It's that feeling of when you see a friend somewhere unexpected and you haven't seen him or her for a very long time, but in the moment you see him, everything you knew about him or her comes flooding into your awareness and you know it again. And sometimes we have that experience with people we've never met before. You meet somebody, it's like I know you. And it comes flooding in. And in prayer, it's the same kind of feeling. You let your intuition remind you of what you've always known about divinity before even you were born. How do you do it? Well, when you wake up and you sit and you ask yourself, from your stillness, what have I always known about divinity? And you let that be the first activity of your mind when waking up. I find it helpful to have a journal. I even like to date the pages, what I remembered about divinity today. That's fun. You let that come up and let that be the first. It can just take 15 minutes if you like, but I find that if you do this as a habit, you start to become addicted to it and you want more of it because, it feels better than just about anything else. Until, of course, you've got to get up to go get your coffee or go to the bathroom. And then you're moving into the second step. Those first activities, whether it is brushing your teeth or dealing with your children or pets or speaking to people. Because now as you start the activity of your life, everything begins to be an opportunity to remind you of how you're connected to the great all there is.